Hello, fifth graders! Today we will be starting our new book. It's technically a short story, but it is called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So, as we're getting into today, you are definitely going to need your copy of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and then maybe paper or pencil if you've been writing down answers to questions as we go. So, as we're getting into today's story, fifth graders, we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of a legend. Okay, so a legend, this is called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and so we're talking about a legend. So a legend would be a story that is passed down through generations, which means people keep telling the story again and again and again. So someone tells it to their children, who tells it to their children, who tells it to their children, and we keep passing the story on and on and on, okay? And whose truth cannot be confirmed. Okay, whose truth cannot be confirmed. So what that means is if it's a legend, no one really knows if it really happened, or what really happened, or how it really happened. Okay, so this is a story called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And so again, it's this idea that a story has been passed on and on and on. And at this point, not really knowing who could tell what really happened or not. Okay, is it a true story? Are parts of it, but not all of it, true? How do you know? And so I'm going to tell you now, it's called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And so really there's going to be this question throughout the book of, is it a legend or not? Is there someone who can confirm what really happened or not? So that's something I kind of want you guys to be thinking about, this idea, again, that it's a legend. And with that idea in mind, who can confirm or deny the truth of this story? Is it actually a legend, or would we actually say this might not be a legend? So we'll see, something we're going to be considering throughout. This is timed when it's timed, fifth graders, on purpose, because this is an autumnal book. It's set in autumn. A lot of the descriptions, well, up until probably the snow fell, a lot of the descriptions of the setting would be kind of similar to things that we would be seeing at this point, with everything turning colors, right? The colors of fall and harvest, and there being a lot of food that's being harvested and available. So there's a little bit of that setting. It is there's a little bit of a mood situation going on. Some of this will be kind of connected to stories about ghosts and about goblins and about ghouls and things like that. Okay, so I've picked it to be at this time on purpose. I will say this book, short it is, but there are a lot of vocabulary words that are tricky. So I would recommend really having that vocabulary list out in front of you as you're reading. Every time, I really expect that you guys are listening along. And I've said this a lot. There's times when I'm answering homework questions for you in the video, and if you're not watching the video, you're not necessarily gonna hear that. There's times when I'm explaining things in the video, but particularly this book, I mean, it's challenging. This is challenging. The vocabulary is challenging. The way that the sentences are written are challenging. The sentences are long. And you'll see right when we get into it, it's going to be a different pace from Gilgamesh. So I really always encourage you to watch the videos, but I especially now encourage you because it is going to be tricky. And if you're not doing it with me, you're going to find yourself probably feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Okay. So, with that in mind, we're going to get into it. Our objective today is going to be, we're reading pages 7 through 10. So we're really taking kind of a short start into it and really looking at identifying mood. Again, what is the mood that's being set at the beginning of the story? Okay, so let's take a look at the questions for tonight's homework, and then we're just going to get right into the reading, and I'm going to be explaining as we go. Okay, so The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, pages 7 through 10. What are the two names of the town in which the story is set? 2, what is one quote that describes what the valley is like? Remember, the short answer every time we are working on restating that question. So one quote that describes what the valley is like is, and then you're going to put your quote. Even though when you're providing a quote, you still need to have that complete sentence. 3, what is the glen in the valley called? Um, 1, 3, these are directly answered by the text. 4 is directly answered by the text. What do people see and hear at Sleepy Hollow? 5 is directly answered by the text. What is the dominant spirit at Sleepy Hollow? 6, what is this spirit's name? So complete sentences. This spirit's name is. 7, what always seems to happen when people live near Sleepy Hollow? And then 8 and 9 relating to our objective. What is the mood in the first pages of the story? So we'd say the mood in the first pages of the story is blank. And 9, what is one quote that supports this mood? One quote that supports this mood is blank. Okay. So these multiple choice questions are really going to be answered like from a quote from the text, right? If you're reading the text, you should be able to see the quote as you're going through, okay? So we are not going to read the introduction, okay? I would like you not to read the introduction, in fact, okay? We're going to get right in. So when we look at this cover page here, right? The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which it tells us is written by Washington Irving. So that's true. The author of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is a man by the name of Washington Irving, okay? However, if you look at this next page, right, it says this was found among the papers of the late Dietrich Knickerbocker, okay? So this is how it's being set up. It's called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Remember, this is like a story that's being passed down. And so the idea is that this story was found among the pages of the late, or papers, excuse me, of the late Dietrich Knickerbocker. So this is a little confusing. The author is Washington Irving, okay? But he wrote it as if he found this story, kind of like someone went into this person's home and went through his materials. And again, this word late here, late, has nothing to do with time. It's a description of someone having passed away, someone dying. So late in this case means that Dietrich Knickerbocker has died. So the idea would be that he died and people went in to look at his materials and they found this story written down, okay? So this is how Washington Irving is describing it, as if this is a story that was found among the papers of someone who had passed away, okay? So a pleasing land of drowsy head it was, of dreams that wave before the half-shut eye, and of gay castles in the clouds that pass, forever flushing round a summer sky, from the Castle of Indolence. So we're going to skip the introduction, and you should be joining me on page 7, okay? In the bosom of one of these spacious coves which indent the eastern shore of the Hudson, at that broad expansion of the river denominated by the ancient Dutch navigators the Tappan Zee, and where they always prudently shortened sail and implored the protection of St. Nicholas when they crossed, there lies a small market town, or rural port, which by some is called Greensburg, but which is more generally and properly known by the name of Terrytown. So this first sentence is really telling us that this is in the northeastern part of America, on the shore of the Hudson River. It's a Dutch area, and you're actually going to see the names. They're Van fill in the blank, right? And this is a very Dutch tradition. So this is a Dutch area, or Dutch settlers came and lived here. And we got the answer to question 1, the names of the town, okay? To tarry means to delay. So if you tarry, it means you're waiting. You're not going where you should be. You're kind of delaying or waiting, okay? This name was given, we are told, in former days by the good housewives of the adjacent country, from the inveterate propensity of their husbands to linger about the village tavern on market days. So in other words, they call it Terrytown because the wives would see that their husbands used to hang around at the tavern. They'd tarry at the tavern rather than come home. Be that as it may, I do not vouch for the fact, but merely advert to it for the sake of being precise and authentic. Not far from this village, perhaps about 2 miles, there is a little valley, or rather lap of land among high hills, which is one of the quietest places in the whole world. A small brook glides through it with just murmur enough to lull one to repose, so lull one to sleep. And the occasional whistle of a quail or tapping of a woodpecker is almost the only sound that ever breaks in upon the uniform tranquility. So this is a really quiet place. So quiet that the only kinds of things that break the noise are like a quail or a woodpecker. Okay? Question 2 you could look at there. I recollect that when a stripling, which means when he was a young boy, my first exploit in squirrel shooting was in a grove of tall walnut trees that shades one side of the valley. I had wandered into it at noontime, when all nature is peculiarly quiet, and was startled by the roar of my own gun, as it broke the Sabbath stillness around, and was prolonged and reverberated by the angry echoes. So he's saying when he was young, he visited this area once to go hunting. And when he shot his gun, it was like so loud and angry because he was in this otherwise perfectly quiet place. If ever I should wish for a retreat whither I might steal from the world and its distractions, and dream quietly away the remnant of a troubled life, I know of none more promising than this little valley. It's so quiet that he would go stay there if he needed a little break from his life. From the listless repose of the place, and the peculiar character of its inhabitants, who are descendants from the original Dutch settlers, this sequestered glen, so sequestered means it's very far from anything else. This sequestered glen has long been known by the name of Sleepy Hollow. And its rustic lads, so farming, rustic, this is like a farming community, and its rustic lads are called the Sleepy Hollow Boys throughout all the neighboring country. A drowsy, dreamy influence seems to hang over the land and to pervade the very atmosphere. Some say that the place was bewitched by a high German doctor during the early days of the settlement. So people say that there was like a spell or some kind of a curse put on the area by a doctor. Others, that an old Indian chief, so we'd say American Indian now or Native American. So this was written very long ago. Actually, we'll see a couple of times in this story where there are things that we wouldn't use today. We would consider it to be inappropriate or racist or not correct terminology. So this is one of those examples. We don't say Indian, right? We'd say American Indian or Native American. Others, that an old Indian chief, the prophet or wizard of his tribe, held his powwows there before the country was discovered by Master Hendrick Hudson. Another one, discovered, right? You can't discover a land that people are already living in. So certain it is the place still continues under the sway of some witching power that holds a spell over the minds of the good people, causing them to walk in a continual reverie. So we're seeing this description that it's like a sleepy, drowsy area. And this word reverie, right? Like a daydream. It's almost as if the people living there are walking in this ongoing, nonstop daydream. They are given to all kinds of marvelous beliefs, are subject to trances and visions, and frequently see strange sights and hear music and voices in the air. The whole neighborhood abounds with local tales, haunted spots, and twilight superstitions. Stars shoot and meteors glare oftener across the valley than in any other part of the country. And the nightmare, with her whole ninefold, seems to make it a favorite scene of her gambols meaning like her wanderings or her walks. Something about this place, right? Stars and meteors seem to shoot and glare more often. There's a lot more nightmares seeming to wander. Interesting. The dominant spirit, dominant meaning main, the main spirit or main ghost or main vision maybe, however, that haunts this enchanted region and seems to be commander-in-chief of all the powers of the air is the apparition of a figure on horseback without a head. Apparition is another word for like a ghost or a spirit. It is said by by some to be the ghost of a Hessian trooper, whose head had been carried away by a cannonball in some nameless battle during the Revolutionary War, and who is ever and anon seen by the country folk hurrying along in the gloom of night, as if on the wings of the wind. His haunts are not confined to the valley, but extend at times to the adjacent roads, and especially to the vicinity of a church at no great distance. Indeed, certain of the most authentic historians of those parts, who have been careful in collecting and collating the floating facts concerning this spectre, another word for ghost or spirit, allege that the body of the trooper having been buried in the churchyard, the ghost rides forth to the scene of battle in nightly quest of his head, and that the rushing speed with which he sometimes passes along the hollow like a midnight blast is owing to his being belated and in a hurry to get back to the churchyard before daybreak. Okay, so we get this description of this dominant spirit. Okay, we haven't gotten its name yet, but we've been having had a description of it. So it tends to hang around Sleepy Hollow, but it also, we learn, he kind of is by a churchyard. And so the story goes. Okay, so the story goes, they think that he lost his head in battle, and his body was buried in the churchyard. And so at night, then, it says that he goes wandering about looking for his head. Okay, and they say that there's a rushing sound, like a midnight blast at night. And so we kind of see this tension already building in the story, okay? On the one hand, it's called a legend of Sleepy Hollow. And these are all kind of rumors, right? People are seeing things, and so they're telling these stories. However, our narrator is talking to us about history and facts, okay? And Washington Irving is trying to create this tension, right, between the legend part of it, and then Dietrich Knickerbocker, who's our historian, right, who's telling us facts and things that he's kept track of, that he's written down. These are historical facts, he's saying, okay? So we're supposed to kind of be wondering about this a little bit as we go through it, okay? We also might want to wonder, what might cause a rushing, like wind, right? Such is the general purport of this legendary superstition. So this is, he's basically saying, this is the gist of the story about this dominant spirit, which has furnished materials for many a wild story in that region of shadows. So general details are about this dominant spirit, and the idea is that a lot of stories, people tell a lot of stories. So when they gather around, they're like, I saw him last night. I heard him. There was this weird happening, right? So they're sharing these stories a lot in this area. And the specter, the spirit, the ghost, is known at all the country firesides by the name of the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. It is remarkable that the visionary propensity I have mentioned is not confined to the native inhabitants of the valley, but is unconsciously imbibed by everyone who resides there for a time. Visionary propensity. So what that means is that he's saying that the people who live there have this tendency to see things, to see these visions, like the Headless Horseman, okay? But he's saying it's remarkable. It's not just the people who were born here that have these visions. Any person who comes and lives there for a while starts to see things too, and starts to hear things too. However wide awake they may have been before they entered that sleepy region, they are sure in a little time to inhale the witching influence of the air and begin to grow imaginative, to dream dreams, and to see apparitions. That word apparitions again, meaning spirits, okay? So it says, no matter how much you walk into that area saying, I don't believe in that stuff. No way, not real, not true. I don't buy in. He's saying no matter how wide awake, he calls it. And so wide awake he's not meaning that literally. He's meaning like no matter how much a person comes in saying, I don't buy into it. It's all garbage. There's no such thing. He says it's sure in a little bit of time that they'll start to get the influence of the area. And they too, any person starts to see things and imagine things and dream these dreams. Okay? I mention this peaceful spot with all possible laud. He's praising it, he says, for it is in such little retired Dutch valleys found here and there embosomed in the great state of New York that population, manners, and customs remain fixed, while the great torrent of migration and improvement, which is making such incessant changes in other parts of this restless country, sweeps by them unobserved. They are like those little nooks of still water which border a rapid stream, where we may see the straw and bubble riding quietly at anchor, or slowly revolving in their mimic harbor, undisturbed by the rush of the passing current. Though many years have elapsed since I trod the drowsy shades of Sleepy Hollow, yet I question whether I should not still find the same trees and the same families vegetating in its sheltered bosom. Okay. So, this last paragraph is to describe that as the world progresses and changes, as there's new inventions, as people's thinking starts to change, as music or clothing or food or building changes over time, this particular area seems to not be affected by that. So, while the rest of the world is taking on new fashions, they're continuing to dress in the same clothing that they always used to. While their music, maybe, or their dancing is changing elsewhere, it stays the same here. So they're saying it's not really affected by change. It's kind of like it's paused in history. So if you've ever like visited a town where it's like an old timey town, where everyone's dressed up and playing parts, kind of like that, except for that it's real. They're just not changing how they act. So, short reading, we're keeping it short. And this is going to be true because as I'm reading this story, right, there's a lot that you can see I'm stopping almost every sentence to explain, and that's probably going to continue to be the case because again, the words and the phrasing of the sentences is challenging, but not because you can't do it. It's just going to be me helping you along with it. Okay, so the final questions that you're left with are related to this idea of mood. Remember, mood is like a tone or emotion. It's something you'd feel, okay? Something you'd feel. So what is the tone or the mood in these first pages? I think there's really only one big one that we should be picking for this, and then supporting that with a quote from the text, okay? Let me know if you have questions, fifth graders, and I will add, if you are someone who gets scared of things, me too, okay? You're not going to find this to be, it'll be a little bit spooky, but it's not going to be something that's very scary, okay? So if that is making you nervous, don't worry, okay? Okay, good luck, and let me know if you have questions.